Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Bible, Your Biography Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Lynna. I am a spiritual mentor and teacher. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, the reason for this podcast is to really share the concept that the Bible is really your biography. It describes a pattern of scripture unfolding within man from the first identity of Adam in a profound state of sleep through to the book of Revelation, which is spiritual awakening. And that concept first came about for me through the teachings of Neville Goddard. So I share Neville's teachings on my YouTube channel, LynnaKTeer, and I share his lectures on the Neville Goddard Lectures channel. So those are linked in the description, and you'll notice at the end of the video, then the little icons for the channel should pop up as well. So again, if you're new here, I wanted to mention that because it's very important. If you're new to this concept that I'm sharing when it comes to scripture. So in this episode, we are going to explore David, but not as history and not as a mere biography and not even as a king who lived long ago. We're going to explore David as revelation, as a state, as a symbol, and as a personification of awakened humanity. That is what David represents. He is a personification of awakened humanity, which is a state of consciousness. Because if we stay at the level of the literal, David remains a man in the past. But if we read scripture the way that Neville Goddard taught us to read it, then David is no longer confined to history. And I will say that the reason I'm able to share this information is, number one, a deep understanding of Neville Goddard's lectures, and two, based on my own experiences, having gone through my spiritual awakening. And I'm still on the journey. The journey never ceases. But having had similar experiences that Neville described, having had experiences through meditation, mystical experiences that directly correlate with certain passages in scripture. So when it comes to David becomes an event, essentially, that we experience as a state of consciousness, so that we ourselves experience within consciousness. David becomes this experience that unfolds within us. He becomes the sun, and that changes everything. Now, this is where we have to kind of slow things down and not get too far ahead of ourselves and be very precise. Neville taught that the Bible is not secular history. And there was a point in my life where I believed it was actual secular history. And I believed what I was taught in the church. And then based on certain experiences that I have had, I no longer believe that that is the case. So use your own discernment. If you have found this channel and it resonates in any part, that is absolutely not a coincidence. We hold sacred knowledge within us, the knowledge that exists within consciousness, that belongs to our soul. So when things resonate, it is really a remembrance, a key being unlocked within each and every one of us. So if anything I share on this channel resonates, then again, that is absolutely no coincidence. It is awakening something within you, even if it is just a slight ignition, if you will, in the beginning, and then perhaps, I said ignition, really a seed that gets planted in order to sprout, if you will, at a later point in time. So, and not a seed that is planted that, well, maybe ignition is the right word, because the information is already within you. And many people who come across this channel, if things really resonate, there's a very good chance that you will have very similar experiences. And if you're not familiar with Neville's teachings, I would highly recommend checking out the Neville Goddard Lectures channel. So, or even my channel, LynnaKTeer.com. So, again, Neville he taught that the Bible is not secular history, and it's not primarily a record of external events. It is a revelation of God in man, and it is the drama of consciousness. It really is your biography. So when the scripture speaks of David, it is not finally pointing you to someone outside of yourself. Now, when we see things that seem to correlate that scripture with secular history, remember that everything that we experience is consciousness itself, a manifestation of consciousness itself, a creation, right? And everything already exists. So everything that we experience really reflects an aspect of consciousness itself, and we are that consciousness having these experiences. And we come across different things, bits of information, things that feel so real on our journey. And we encounter those things at certain points based on where we are in our journey. And then as we continue and then go through spiritual awakening, for example, then we encounter different types of information. But that still all comes from within. So a lot of the scientific information that we see will correlate with where we are at any given point on our journey. For example, if the Ark of the Covenant had been found, then that would corroborate what one believes about the Bible being historical fact. If you get to a point where you realize that it is not a historical fact, right, then you see that information, hear that information, the news or whatever, and you realize that it's just an experience, right? It is just an experience, a manifestation of a state that exists within us at one point on our own journey. And I don't know if that will make sense to everybody, and if not, that is okay. It will make sense to a few. It really depends on where you are in your own journey, but no given point is right or is wrong. Like, depending on where you are, it doesn't mean somebody is farther ahead than you or you're behind. It just it is simply where you are on your journey as a spiritual being having this human experience. So let me go back to my notes. Where was I? All right. So again, when scripture speaks of David, it is not pointing to someone outside of yourself. It is revealing something that must be born in awareness, something that must be recognized within awakened humanity. So something that must be experienced and not merely studied. And this is why David matters so deeply in Neville's teachings of the promise. And Neville spoke about the promise based on his own experiences, and that is the awakening of consciousness within you, where you realize then that you are that consciousness having the experiences that you are having. Because David is not just a symbol of kingship. David is not just a symbol of devotion or of covenant. David is the Son. And the Son is not separate from you. Because you, consciousness, are the Father. You are the I Am. You are God, the I Am. You are Jesus, the power and the wisdom of God. At that point on your journey, from awakened or from being in a deep state of sleep, not remembering that you are consciousness having the human experience, into spiritual awakening. So the Son is what is revealed when you awaken. And David is the sum total of all the generations of man and their experiences fused into a single being personified. And I know that's a profound statement. It means that David is the integrated man. David, you are that integrated man, because on this journey we are fragmented. And through this series of experiences that we move through, we begin integrating those fragments back into ourselves. The fragments that occur through things like trauma, right? So again, David is the gathered self. You have integrated everything back into yourself, healed what you've needed to heal, integrated the things that you have remembered through spiritual insight, through the lessons and experiences. So David is what appears when fragmentation ends. And David is what is recognized when all the scattered parts of identity are drawn back into unity. So this episode is really about the movement from fragmentation into integration, from sleep into awakening, from states unconsciously occupied into the realization of the one who has occupied them all. And in that realization, David appears, not as other, as you, and not as separate, but as the Son within you. You are God the Father, and David is your son. And that's one of the most radical and beautiful parts of Neville Goddard's teachings. You are the I Am. The David within you, the awakened man within you, is the Son. Now, if this is heard through religious minds, it sounds blasphemous or confusing. I do realize that. But if it is heard through the lens of consciousness, even with a really open mind, being open to the possibility, then what happens is there lies the opportunity for it to open into living revelation. And this does not mean that you, as a human personality, become inflated with ego, spiritual ego, that is. It does not mean that the temporary self is God in a personal, boastful sense. And I think that's really where, when individuals first come across this information, and I know this was the case for me, saying that I am God sounded almost boastful. Like, who am I to say that? Right? But it's the truth, and it's not through ego, it's through remembrance. And there's really a deep humbling that comes with that. And there is no one better than another. We are all on a journey as consciousness, having a human experience. We are all at different points on the journey. And we are all aspects of the same consciousness. So how could one be any better than another? Whether it is someone on the street or someone who has had the experiences, spiritual awakening, specifically what Neville called the promise, or just a deep understanding that yes, each one of us is essentially God the Father, the I Am. Neville called that your own wonderful human imagination, the creative aspect, which the creative aspect of man is Eve. She personifies the creative aspect of man. So I'll talk about Eve in another episode. So, again, it does not mean the temporary self the self is God in that personal, boastful sense. It means that your deepest awareness, your I am, your being, before all labels, all identities, all conditions, all roles, is the Father. That awareness is the source. It is the originating reality. It is the one who entered all of the states, meaning states of consciousness. It is the one who dreamed all of the roles that humanity would play. It is the one who played and is still playing every part. The beggar man, the thief, the rich man, the poor man. And David, as the Son, is the revelation of everything that awareness has passed through and gathered into the self. So the Father is the source. The Son is the expression revealed. The Father is the awareness. The Son is the embodied totality of experience recognized. And this is why David is not separate from you. David is what appears when the one who has lived through all fragmentation, all states of consciousness, all conditions, all masks, all roles, finally awakens and sees the whole. You may not be aware of all the fragmentation, all the states of consciousness that you have moved through, but they occur. You live through all of them. This is not abstract theology. This is the structure of awakening itself, the structure of the experience of the journey. You begin life identified with fragments. You think you are this role. this pain, this history, this identity, this condition, this fear, this body, this name. Then awakening begins. And as awakening begins, you start to recognize that you are not any one state permanently. Even identifying as one who is spiritually awakened is an identity, is a state of consciousness in and of itself. So you are the one moving through these states of consciousness. Then deeper still, you begin to realize that every state that you have occupied has left an imprint in consciousness. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is lost. Nothing has been outside of the journey. There is nothing outside of you. Consciousness is not outside of you. You are within consciousness. And when all of those states of consciousness are gathered, integrated, and reconciled, then David appears as the sun. So David is not just one more symbol. David is the evidence of awakening. David is the inner revelation that all of the journeys, all the generations, all of the states of consciousness, all of the experiences, all the seeming fragmentation, were moving toward integration, bringing you home to yourself. And that integration, or that integrated being, is personified as David. So let us stay with this idea because it is central. David is the sum total of all the generations of man and their experiences fused into a single being personified. That man being you, whether you are male or female. Give me 1 second, I'm going to take a drink. Now, what does that actually mean in the language of states of consciousness? It means that every identity that you have ever occupied is a fragment of a much larger role. You have been many things within consciousness. You have played countless parts. You have known joy and grief, expansion and contraction, confidence and fear, union and separation, certainty and confusion, abundance and loss. You have occupied masculine states and feminine states. You have occupied states of strength and states of vulnerability. You have been the one who pursues and the one who retreats. You have been the one who leads and the one who follows. You have been the one who believes and the one who doubts. And each of these states has felt real while you were in them. Each one is claimed for a time. This is who I am. But none of them were the whole you. They were aspects, partial expressions, fragments in the great drama called life. And the journey of awakening is not merely about learning to reject the wrong states and choose the right ones. That is part of the discipline of the mind, yes. But the promise, consciousness awakening within you, that experience goes deeper than that. It is not about the promise is about integration. It is about the return of all that seems separate into the one who has always been the source. And this is why remembrance becomes such a powerful part of awakening. You begin to remember. Not necessarily as memory in the ordinary sense, but as spiritual recognition. You begin to recognize patterns. You begin to recognize why certain experiences repeated. You begin to recognize why certain identities formed. Begin to recognize what was fragmented for the purpose of the journey. And then the healing begins. But healing in this framework is not fixing damage. Healing is gathering what was scattered. Healing is reconciling what was fragmented. Healing is integrating what was split off. So the soul, which appears fragmented, for the purpose of the experience, is called back one by one. Each aspect returns. Each part is gathered. Each dimension of self that was individualized for the purpose of learning is reintegrated into the awakened self. So say, for instance, that you experience a particular trauma in your life, and something that you needed to heal from. That is a fragmentation. When you heal from that, you no longer identify with that. You integrate that aspect back into you. It is no longer fragmented. You gather it back onto you. The individual aspect of you that has been hurt is a fragmentation. You heal that aspect of you. You realize nothing outside of you can hurt you. And you gather that aspect back onto you. So each dimension of the self that was individualized for the purpose of learning is reintegrated. And this is why your reality is populated with people, experiences, reflections, and seeming others. Every individual represents an aspect of the drama. Every relationship reveals something. Every encounter mirrors some state of consciousness, some lesson, some movement of consciousness. Can you begin to recognize them? This does not mean that other people are unreal or meaningless. It means that your experience of reality is symbolic and psychological. As within, so without. You are experiencing a reflection. It means that what you meet is always tied to what is active in your own consciousness. And as you awaken, you begin to see this. You begin to see that everything has been part of the gathering. Everything has been part of the return. Everything has been part of the formation of David. So now let's talk about the awakening process itself. What happens when one awakens? First, there's usually disillusionment with the outer world as ultimate cause. You begin to sense that life is not merely happening to you. You begin to suspect that what you call reality is somehow tied to consciousness. Then you start to observe states. You notice how identity shifts. You notice how one assumption can color the entire day, an entire relationship, an entire season of life. You notice that you are not fixed, you are moving, you are occupying states, you are assuming, making assumptions about yourself, about reality. This is the beginning of freedom. But then something else comes, something much deeper. You begin to remember. Again, not just intellectually, the remembrance comes from your soul, your intuition. Some people will call it the gut. For me, it is a deep knowing. Oftentimes it is felt. I also receive spiritual downloads, so my spiritual gifts have come online, meaning I am attuned to my higher self, attuned to consciousness itself, which shows up as the 5 clairs: clairsentient, claircognizant, clairaudient, right? I'm going to call these psychic abilities. But it is a deep remembrance. You begin to recognize that all of the versions of yourself that you have tried to leave behind are still within the field of being. The hurt self, the ashamed self, the proud self, the striving self, the abandoned self, the successful self, the failed self, the hidden self, the performing self, the guarded self, the longing self, the frightened self, all of it. And rather than trying to erase them, to avoid them, awakening begins to integrate them. You see those aspects. You observe them. You begin to no longer identify with them, but just observe, recognizing that they were states of consciousness you moved through for the sake of experience, so that you could awaken to your true nature as the I am, as consciousness, having the experience. This is where healing becomes holy. Not because pain is glorified, but because nothing is excluded. Absolutely nothing is excluded from redemption. Everything returns. Everything is reconciled. Everything is gathered back into wholeness. This is why you are called one by one. Each fragmented aspect of the soul is summoned back. Each lesson learned in parallel experience, in dimension, in state, in role, becomes part of the awakened totality. And when enough of this integration has occurred, the sense of inner division begins to dissolve. You no longer feel like a collection of competing selves. You no longer feel inwardly split between who you were, who you should be, and who you fear you are. You begin to feel gathered. You begin to feel whole. You begin to feel ancient, not in age, but in depth, really ancient in depth. You begin to sense that there is something in you that has been here before all of the roles that you have played, particularly in this lifetime, the ones that you are aware of. Something in you that preceded every state that you have experienced. And this brings us to the next great symbol. And that is the Ancient of Days. And I will I will at some point speak even deeper on this in another video. The Ancient of Days means before time. Not merely old, not aged, not worn by years. Ancient means primordial, original, eternal. Before the world was. And when Scripture speaks of the Ancient of Days, it is revealing the divine ruler who is eternally all-powerful. Psychologically, this points to the deepest level of your being, the awareness before all experience, the source before all states, the one who entered time but is not caused by time. This is your eternal identity. This is the Father. This is the one who has always been. So when awakening deepens, you do not merely awaken as someone with new ideas, you awaken into the recognition of that which is before time. You awaken as the one who has played all of the parts, the one who has occupied all of the states, the one who has forgotten and remembered, the one who has descended into fragmentation and risen through integration. This is the Ancient of Days. And from that awareness, David is recognized. This is why the revelation is so profound. You awaken as the Father, as the Ancient of Days. And then you behold David as your son. This is the experiential structure that Neville points to. The Father recognizes the Son. Awareness recognizes its integrated expression. The Source recognizes the totality of what it has brought forth through experience. So David is not merely the beloved boy. David is the personification of awakened humanity. David is humanity gathered, redeemed, integrated, and revealed. He is the Son because he is the embodiment of all that the Father has expressed through the generations of experience. Now we have to place this within Neville's teachings of the promise. The law concerns states, assumption, imagination, and the shaping of experience. The promise concerns identity, awakening, and the revelation of God in man. David belongs to the promise. David is not about manifestation in the ordinary sense. David is not about getting something in the world. David is about the revelation of who you are beyond the world. That is why this experience cannot be reduced to psychology in the ordinary sense, even though it unfolds through consciousness. It is spiritual awakening in its deepest form. It is not self-improvement. It is not positive thinking. It is not merely emotional healing. It is the unveiling of the divine pattern within man. And in that unveiling, David appears as the Son. This means that all of your experiences, all of your states, all of your seeming fragmentation, all of your lessons, all of your embodiments, all of your roles have not been random. They have been moving toward revelation. They have been moving toward integration. They have been moving toward David. So when you say, I am redeemed, this means more than forgiveness. It means gathered, restored, made whole. It means every part of you that you have ever played is called back into unity. Not erased and not denied, integrated. And this is why David is awakened humanity. David is not merely an individual. David is humanity in its awakened, integrated form, personified in the Son. And yet each individual still has their own identity, their own journey, their own individualized experiences in consciousness. Each person in time will recognize themselves as the Father and as the Son. And as the Spirit. There is no contradiction in that. The outer multiplicity remains, but the awakened one recognizes the unity beneath it. Your reality is filled with individuals, but your awakening reveals that everything has unfolded within consciousness. Everything is within you. Everything is part of the great drama of awakening into divine identity. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a truth that is both staggering and intimate. You are the Father. You are the Ancient of Days. You are the awareness before time. You are the one who has played all of the parts. And you are David. You are the Son. You are the integrated, awakened humanity that emerges when all of the fragments are gathered. You are the Source. And you are the revealed expression. Not as two beings. Or rather as one reality, recognized at different depths. So David is not in the past. David is not far away. David is not someone else. David is what is revealed when your journey through states reaches integration. David is awakened humanity personified. David is the beloved Son within. And this is why the Bible is your biography, because it is all within you, and it all unfolds within you. It is revealed within you, and when it is revealed, you do not merely understand David, you recognize him. And I can say that to be true, because I have had the experiences. I have recognized David. David is being revealed to me. It is why I am able to share this information with such passion, because I understand that every individual will one day have this experience. And if you have come across these teachings, if you have come across Neville Goddard's teachings, and understand his teachings at some point beyond what most people consider just manifestation. But if you understand the depths, then you too will one day have these experiences. You too will one day recognize yourself as David, and too as the Father, as consciousness. So thank you for joining me for this episode of the Bible, Your Biography Podcast. In this episode, we explored David as the Son, the integration of all states of consciousness, the gathering of the fragmented self, the Ancient of Days, which we touched on just briefly, and the fulfillment of the promise within man. This is not just a story in Scripture. It is the revelation of awakening within you. So again, if you have not listened to my other podcast or my other YouTube channels, so my YouTube channel is LynnaKTeer. The podcast that correlates with that is the Journey of Awakening podcast, and also the Mindset Manifesting podcast. And then I have the Neville Goddard lectures available on most podcast platforms and here on YouTube as well. So check out those other channels. It helps to bring each aspect of the journey together, from the unawakened self, to awakened humanity, the awakened man, the awakened you, and then to Scripture and understanding Scripture from the aspect of the awakened being within you. All right. I will see you guys all in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining me. And I hope to have you back, because if you have found this, again, there are no coincidences. There's something wonderful in store for you on your own journey. All right. Bye now.